Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Moss. I am professor of critical studies and director of the MA program at Roski, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to our Roski talk by Peter Wu. Just a few things for you to know. Peter will be giving his talk from between 10 and 11. He will stop at about 10:45 or 10:50, and we'll be able to do about 10 minutes of Q&A with the members of the public. And then we ask you to please sign off if you are not in the seminar at 11 a.m. So our tradition is to have our graduate students introduce our speakers. So I'd like to introduce Nawi Garcia, who is one of our MA curatorial grad students, who will now introduce Peter. Nawi?
Hi, thank you for coming. Peter Wu is a multimedia artist and curator based in Los Angeles, California, with an extensive exhibition history since the completion of his MFA studies at the San Francisco Art Institute. Wu has worked across multiple mediums with a particular emphasis on actualizing his ideas around technology, evolution, and the body. His most recent solo exhibitions include The Creatures of Prometheus at RSF Projects in 2018 and Rise of the Fly the second at the Vincent Price Art Museum in 2017. Most recently, he has been working on a project under the name of Epic, an artist-run virtual experiment where he has conceptualized group exhibitions including Labyrinth and Fallen Monuments. Thank you. We can all welcome Peter Wu.
Welcome, Peter.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so should I just go?
Just go.
Okay, so hi, everybody. My name is Peter Wu Plus. I've added the plus to my name to be inclusive other than myself. And so just a little start off, I was born in Canada in a small town, and I'm from a family of color that we were the only people of color for most of my upbringing. So that's an important distinction going forth and talking about my work, because my work has to do a lot with the idea of the other and whatnot. I'm just going to jump into my work and just kind of try to rifle through for the past 5 years. I'm only starting with the past 5 years because that's when I kind of just switched over and start really making the work that I cared about, which had to do with science fiction and technology and bridging those things and talking about the anxieties of what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. So, just to start off, everybody seen the movie The Fly? Everybody knows about The Fly? So, The Fly is a movie, the first one, the original is 1958 by Kurt Newman, and the second one, the remake, is by David Cronenberg in 1986. So, I started off with these movies because they really captured the anxiety of their times. The 1958 one was really capturing the fear of the post-war and the Cold War era with the Soviet Union. And the 1986 really captured the horror of the body and the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. So in my first piece that I'm going to show, it's called Rise of the Fly. Sorry, there's a thing moving right now. So the first piece I'm going to show is called Rise of the Fly, which is combining the footage of these two movies and into a video installation that uses video mapping. So this is a still from the 1958 movie, and the 1986 movie is vastly, vastly different. But thematically and story-wise, they're a little similar. So, oh, shoot. Okay, here is the still from the 1986 movie. So this is when he's already turned into a monster. So if nobody knows about The Fly, what happens is the scientist builds a teleportation machine where he can teleport from one place to another, and this household fly gets into the first chamber where he's experimenting on himself, and he ends up in the other chamber, and the DNA is combined between him and the household fly. So he's contaminated with this, this new DNA, and he becomes a monster. The reason why I chose these movies, other than all the other science fiction movies, is because you know, in 1958, there was 500 films that were made between 1948 and 1962 that were indexed under the broad heading of science fiction. But this is pretty much the only film that was, instead of like, you know, the idea of like a monster invading a country or coming out of the water or these horror monsters, this monster comes from the inside. So it was created rather than something that was invading. So that's why I chose that. So the monster was from within. Okay. So this is a image of a piece I did in Green Exhibitions in 2015. And so this is the first Rise of the Fly piece. And so what you see here is just some large paintings. They're 40 by 60. And I'm video projecting and mapping on top of these paintings. So you can see that the video changes and it goes through using the footage of both combined. We don't actually see the monster in any of the footage, but the monster is only in the painting. So you see the paintings, they're kind of like, they're separating, the image is separating, coming together all the time, just like, you know, particles in the chamber from one point to another. Okay, so here we go. Okay. So this is just the image of a production still from the 1958 movie, and I'm just going to show you this because it's combining this to create a neon piece after. So this is a still of from the 1958 movie where these neon lights are happening when this machine, the teleportation machine, is working, and it's the only cursor to tell the audience that something technological is happening. Okay, so these flashing lights, it's like, oh, this machinery isn't working. So I combined those two source images and created this neon light, which is, it says, no use now, help me, but don't come near me, kill fly, please, love you. Now, looking back on this work, it's pretty apropos what's going on now with this social distancing and whatnot. So it's kind of weird to see this again. As you can see when the writing, so it's the monster writing this. So in that first image I showed you with the fly head, he's trying to tell his wife, like, this sentence, this last sentence before he goes basically offs himself. And he is writing, you can see it's like, you know, you can tell what it is. It's kind of like legible, and then it starts slowly becoming more choppy and squiggly and non-legible. So that's the beginning of my first, so this is the Rise of the Fly 2 at the Vincent Price Art Museum. So that's the entryway to this exhibition. And in the back corner here, you'll see that that first piece from Green Exhibitions is reconfigured in this corner room. So instead of this grid that's going up and down, we have it kind of separated and doing that. And I like doing that in my work. I do this quite often where I kind of use generations of the work and I kind of reconfigure them. And so this, the context is new. Okay, so here's another view of that. So you can see the panels, the light. So it's weird when, this is very strange. This is kind of one of the first exhibitions that kind of used video projection and video mapping on top of paintings. And people really were, they didn't really get it. They thought that they were television screens or, I don't even know. They didn't think that it was, they didn't understand the technology involved, which is kind of what science fiction is all about. This idea of novum. Darko Suvin is the only critical theorist that kind of wrote about science fiction. And the idea of novum is this idea of this new technology that's interjected into a narrative that kind of puts you outside of your own reality. So I was trying to introduce that. Okay, and here's another view. And here's a view of a piece that I created for that exhibition. And again, it's combining the two footages, but instead here, instead of playing this very frontal flat surface, I'm kind of trying to go into more three-dimensional with the video projections and really kind of control that aspect. And the paintings have become more and more abstract. We're gonna skip ahead. So we have this piece that I got a grant for, and I was invited. So someone came to the Vincent Price Art Museum and saw that exhibition and said, you would be perfect for this show that is, it's about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein because it was the 200th anniversary of the publication of the book. And so this piece is called Or the Modern Prometheus, which is actually the subtitle of Frankenstein, which got basically dropped off in the 50s. So actually the original title is Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. So I just took that leftover and reinstated it. So again, you can see here, I'm really playing with more in three-dimensional, and it's really playing the thematics of Prometheus. So if anybody doesn't know the Greek god Prometheus, Prometheus has to do with this god who gave fire to the humans so humans can kill animals and eat them. And the gods didn't want that, so he was persecuted for eternity. And so I'm just really kind of touching upon this idea of tools and the idea of invention, which is basically this idea of mechanized death, and that every kind of invention you can think of, it's pretty much always for the good of humanity, and then it eventually becomes bad. So whether it's a guillotine or the atom bomb or drones or social media, okay? These are all these new technologies that basically are double-edged swords, okay? So eventually they just become really horrible for society. So I'm kind of bringing up this idea. And also with technology, the more technological you get, the more distancing you get from this idea of mechanized death and distancing between people. So also in this piece, there's this 3D printed head. That's my own image. And I'm be able to control where the video projections are happening and whatnot. And a lot of my work, for some reason, it just comes out very dark. I don't know how to control that, and I've just accepted it. So that's just what is going on. And you can see here, there's also some of these silk kind of printed scarf type situations that are flowing slowly in the dark. And there's these two fans that are underneath that are blowing them. Okay, so you can hear again, you can see that, another image. And this is a deconstructed guillotine that keeps on spinning around. So at the end of this piece, this guillotine just basically becomes white, and it charges this head because the head is printed out of 3D, glow in the dark. So it charges this head with light, and then all the lights come off, and this head and these hands in the back glow for 30 seconds, which kind of mimics this idea of the guillotine. And you can still process the information for 30 seconds after you get your head. Okay, so this piece was at the RSF projects in, I think, 2016, 17, 18. Okay, yeah, 2017. So this piece, I really took this idea of the 3D using 3D space and took it a step further. So I built this wooden frame, which is 5-sided, and there's a scrims in between the frames so that when the light and the video projection of light passes through, it captures and it catches all the projection screens around it. So there's 2 projectors going on at 45-degree angles and showing different images. So I'm able to control where the light is happening on everything. And you can see it's taking over the whole space here. And so my skills are getting more and more advanced here. So I never learned animation I studied sculpture and video when I was in grad school, but I kind of left that. I dropped that when I came to LA. And then I picked this up again in 2015 when I started all this again. Really. So there's another image there. So we can see that the head, there's another head in there, but the head has become more and more monstrous in a way. So there's another image. So my face here is embellished with these other 3D models, which are models of Chinese souvenirs that you can pick up in Chinatown. So it's either these dragons or these kind of very kitschy kind of souvenirs that you find in Chinatown, lions and stuff like that, very traditional and mythological. And I've embellished my own face with these. Okay, again, here the guillotine comes back again as this spinning guillotine. And you can see I'm controlling the light on the actual frame. And I think here's a close-up of the 3D printed sculpture. And I also, again, I never knew how to 3D print, and so I picked one up. So it's all these skills that are accumulating. I keep on accumulating, and it keeps on making these projects more and more insane. Okay, I think I can show this. Hopefully I can do this. Okay, so hopefully the sound will be okay. So this is for my last piece at the Cola Awards at the Barnstall, which just happened last year. And this is called, Or the Creature of Prometheus 2. So again, this is another generation of the last piece. So I'm using the same framework, but all the images and video are different. And I'm now including dialogue that's half created by machine learning. It's GPT-2. It's a writing machine learning software. Okay, let's see if this will play.
What am I to you? A mirror for memories? A descendant of a broken lineage? We are an accumulation of transformations. So transfer you into me completely. It's better that way. It's easier not to feel nor to suffer. How accurately do you remember your father? More specifically of a memory involving an object lost. It was a collection which you did not participate in. A tradition from which we do not share. You were 9 or 10. You walked through school feeling that familiar feeling. Distant. There is no one else in the world. So hollow, I would echo. Look up now. There's a definition coming through. Was it all a dream? Imagine now the dark zone. Reflections and images appear. See it as shared all these years. Hours and milliseconds pass away. now we are traveling our separate ways towards a non-perfect ending to a non-fictional story. I want your life. They're the only ones who matter. They're the only ones left. Remake appearances to bed. Nothing seems to amaze me. It's all right here. Everything's all right here. It's all right here. We're all right here. I see it's already here.
Okay, so that is basically a culmination of all these, the past 5 years in kind of all these skills and all this kind of investigation happening within this work here. So the main two cruxes of the past 5 years has been The Fly and this idea of Prometheus. So I do reinvestigate and go back in this idea of The Fly with some works that I'm probably not going to show you, which basically deals with where I entered all my history of paintings, because I used to paint when I first got out of grad school. And I put all my paintings into a data set, and this machine learning program kicked out all these new paintings that were created. So any questions of this so far?
Peter?
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a suggestion. If you're going to show any other video,
Yeah.
If everyone could please turn off their videos when Peter's screening something, that will help to improve the bandwidth. So just let us know if you're going to show another video.
Okay, that's it. That's the only video.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, and one other thing, everyone can write questions in the chat as well. You're welcome to write chat questions, and we'll get to those later. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm just gonna bridge into Epoch and talk about kind of where all these things have come from. Can you still see the screen with the picture of the plaster thing? Okay, because my screen just switched over. So this is a picture of this piece I did in 2012. And it's a double, let me go back to that. Okay, so it's a double cast kind of technique where I find all these found objects from thrift stores and I embed them in plaster, and then I pour some plaster into everything, these molds and stuff like that, and I flip the mold over, and then I kind of chisel out all these, try to reveal and chisel out all these figures back up. So what happens when you're chiseling, you're kind of like destroying what it looks like, but also trying to reveal at the same time. Here is this close-up of this. So you can see it kind of looks like a ruin, kind of like Pompeii or whatever not. So it actually, the floor plan, you can see kind of these walls. The floor plan is actually of the restaurant that I used to grow up. My family used to have a Chinese restaurant, and it's the floor plan of the Chinese restaurant I grew up in. All these things are embedded. There's also this Chinese bell situation going on, and there's a speaker inside And oops, shoot, hold on. Oh well. Okay, so there's a speaker inside, and the speaker reads this story, which was recorded in 1998 when I was an undergrad. And my teacher told me, this is the best thing you've ever done. And I was like, okay. She was like, I don't think you really fully realize what it's about. And it took me a really long time to fully grasp, I think, what it is about. So I'm gonna read the story, and so you just kind of get a hint on what's going on with that piece. I remember when I was 5 or 6, I was in grade school. The night before school, I was all panicky because I didn't have a button. It was button the next day, and everybody, all these kids got to show off how many buttons they've been collecting. Years previous, kids came to school with thousands of buttons on their shirts, all different colors, covered in buttons. They'd be like walking buttons. That's what they'd be like. And I usually come up with nothing because I never bought them or collected them. I just never did anything with them. So I asked my dad that night, I need a button. Do you have any? Do you know if you collected any buttons? And it was late, and he kind of got, shrugged me off and says, no, I don't. And so I guess I was going the next day to school again with no buttons. So I'm walking to school the next morning, and just like I thought, all these kids with thousands of buttons on their shirts, and I had nothing. No buttons, not even one single button. And I didn't really take it as anything. So, I never took it as anything because I pretty much used to it. Around 10 in the morning, my dad came and knocked on the door, and he asked the classroom teacher to see me. I go see him, he crouches down and looks at me and says, I got something for you. I got this button, and it was this white button. And I wore that button, that single button, very proudly for the rest of the day. And now so many years have passed, and I don't know where that white button is. I've lost the button. So obviously this kind of story has to deal with this idea of otherness, which kind of, can't scroll to the next image. Hold on, okay, wait, there we go. So that story has to do with the otherness, but what I didn't really realize is that, obviously the story had to do with the button, not having buttons and being culturally different from everybody else, that we just never did anything with buttons. So I thought the story always had to do with this idea of outside and otherness and whatnot. But what I kind of realized in the past few months is that the crux of the story is really that white button itself, that even though it was a very loving gesture from my father, it was this idea of passing something down to fit in. It's like this idea of assimilation. So it's kind of this intergenerational type weird assimilation of Asians into white culture. So that's a really kind of shocking thing to kind of realize for myself. So going forth, there's a lot of my future works kind of going to be dealing with that. And just referencing this image here, you'll see how, and I'm going to go into Epoch Gallery right now, you'll kind of see how these kind of lineages have gone on through my work. So this is Epoch Gallery, which was started during quarantine. And so what happened, so it was in April, but I was trying to work and figuring out how to do this in March and really kind of figure out how I could get this idea across in the way I wanted it to. Because when quarantine started happening, you can see that all these galleries were really paralyzed by their inability to kind of adapt to this online world. And so you got online viewing rooms and stuff like that, which are not very satisfying as an experience to see art. Now, of course, there are some fallbacks to showing work online, as in there's not a visceralness to the work because you're not physically present in front of it. But in exchange, I replaced it with a different kind of experiences, which is this kind of building context for art. Okay, so it's like this idea of not just white walls, but building this kind of this scenery and this context, so that, and the work that's in there is also contextual and builds context for what the environment is. So it kind of is a play back and forth. This first show is called End Demo, and it featured Jessica Growing, Cara Jostling, Erica Mahene, Jake Keen Mayman, Emmanuel Ross, and myself. I felt like I had to put myself in it because if I got to put my money where my mouth is, so I interjected my own work into it. And those are the works that I was talking about where I interjected all my work into a database, and then this AI kicked out all these new variations of my work. So let's go through what's going on. Okay, so here's some close-ups. And again, it's me trying to figure out how this program works and there's several programs that go into this. There's like 4 different programs that trying to figure out how this is happening. So this first iteration is a little bit raw. And again, when I first presented this to artists, they didn't really know. A lot of them didn't really understand what was going on. So a lot of them were trepidatious in joining or participating. But so I really kind of asked some of my closer colleagues, and that really knew me and knew the work kind of I put out, and they really trusted me, and I really am thankful for them, because without them, this would have never happened, and their trust and belief in me is really, really important. Okay, so here's some more images, and you can see one of those images in the square at the bottom is my own piece here. This is Jessica Growing's piece. This is Erica Mahine's. So this is all within this wreckage. So obviously I play with a lot of allegory in all these contexts and environments that I built. So in a very literal sense, in a certain way that, or metaphorical literal sense, is that this is a ruined gallery, you know? So this is, you know, these white walls, and I didn't texture these environments specifically because I wanted that starkness of the white. This is Emmanuel Ross's tower, which is based off of Blade Runner's. So if you ever seen Blade Runner I think in the Innis building, there's this pattern that is repeating on all the buildings. So he takes that pattern and he creates these columns out of it, which is really interesting. Okay, and this is Kara Josling's work. So a couple, this is in the back. Okay, so then we go on to the next show, which is called Afterlife. And this features Nancy Baker Cahill, features Cortez, Jesper Just, this duo called Inside Duel from Poland, Statue Sumuski, Mark Verboff, and Alice Wang. Sorry if I'm pronouncing any of those names wrong. So here it's in a progression of me figuring out really how to model and really texture and build environments. So this is, you can see that this is a vast, in a certain way, improvement, but you know, improvement's a weird word, but like, you can see like everything is very much more rendered realistically, let's say. Okay, so this again, this idea of an allegory, this idea of a split building, this dual thing and falling apart, you know, you can draw a lot of conclusions there. So this is that dual inside dual. So they created these really fantastic kind of sculptural works that have to do with environmental and future bodies and whatnot. Okay, so there's a video down here by Jesper Just, and it was really fitting because it was called Lano, and it was this place where it was built as a utopia, and it basically the scene goes through, and you can see that it's you see this water kind of falling down, but it's all like staged like a Hollywood movie. So it's kind of like this utopia dystopia kind of situation going on. I'm not showing any. I can't go on the website, unfortunately, because it's too much bandwidth. So I've just noticed that through other talks that I've given that it just doesn't work. So that's why I'm just showing stills. If you have time, just go to epoch.gallery and you can witness all these things yourself and explore. All these things you can go on VR too. And so on your phone, if you have cardboard, you can place your phone in the cardboard and you can kind of look around. So especially this environment here, it works especially well because when you're at the top of the building, you're looking down is quite, it gives you a little bit of vertigo. So this piece is by Beatrice Cortez. And so outside here, there's a hole in the corner that you can kind of look down, you hear a voice, so there's directional sound going on, and you can hear this voice. I think it's by Andrew Cuomo. He's talking about the pandemic and whatnot. And so this piece, you enter this hole and you see this dog, which I think is from the LACMA collection. And you can go around in different areas and look around, the sound changes through directional sound. And so this piece was a precursor to her piece that she just made for the Rockefeller Center for the Free Sculpture Award with Lifewater. And so a lot of this, sometimes these artists, I invite these artists and I really give them full reign of what they want to do. I really try to encourage them to be experimental. And so Beatrice came with this and she was like, I want to use this as kind of like, investigating these things before the sculpture came up, because the sculpture got postponed, and she really wanted to kind of investigate VR and whatnot, and in a virtual reality environment. And she said that this really helped her during the quarantine because, all these things got postponed, so it gave her something to look forward to, but also think about her work differently. And those are kind of really cool things when you think about, like, enabling artists a different way to view their work. And because scale and physicality in a really weird way doesn't really matter in these environments. So you can really kind of upscale and really be experimental with a lot of different things. Okay, so this is looking down the hill, and you can go down here and you see Nancy Baker Chahill's work, which she has an app called Fourth Wall, and which is really amazing. And so she's taking some of her older work and placed it back into a VR environment, which you can look around, which kind of looks like these comets kind of falling down to Earth and whatnot. And I think this is the back of the building with Alice Wang's work. Yeah. So, and also you can see these on the ground and kind of scattered around the whole environment is Mark's Antifa page cutout things, flyers or works. Okay, so this is Fallen Monuments, and so this is the third show, and this was kind of a response to Black Lives Matters movement. And just to be honest, the last show, Afterlife, it came out right when all that was starting, and I kind of felt like I failed. And I almost quit. And stopped doing the whole gallery because I didn't think I was saying enough and doing my responsibility. And so with this show, fortunately, I got it together and I had some encouragement, and I started this show. And it was quite debilitating, that whole thing for me. So to try to even getting this project underway again was difficult. So yes. So this show features Ivan Argote, York Chang, Alana Clark, Dallas Forrest Kim, Ricardo Rivera, Martin Robinson, and Conrad Ruiz. So how I start with every show is that usually I start with an environment and an artist. So I think about one artist that I kind of build a show around. And so the first show was Kara Jostling. The second show was Beatrice Cortez. This show was Martin Robinson. The Labyrinth was Amir Microvan, because he built the environment, but I'll show those images later. So Fallen Monuments, it's really quite political, and it has to do in talking about the idea of the institution and the failure of the institution, the fragility of the institution, really. So this is Ivan Argote's piece in the middle, and this is him. This is Columbus, a 3D scan of the Columbus Monument in New York New York's some kind of square. Where is it? Central Park Square. And so he puts this indigenous, what is it called? Like a parka type situation on top of it. So this is Martin Robinson's, and this is about, Martin Robinson's piece. And it's about his time at his grad school and profiling that happened during his school. cool. And this is like, when you click on the video, it kind of, you know, get this kind of slot machine. The title of the piece is called Slot Machine, where his image is rotating around, and you can click the image again, and then it stops at a certain time, and then when you roll off of it, and then it begins again. This is Conrad Ruiz's work, and so these are his Man on Fire series, and these are watercolors. So I like to put flat work sometimes into the show, and how I kind of curate the exhibitions. Also, I start with the one artist, but then I kind of think about who fits in that, and so it's kind of, it bridges out like a web. So all the artists are chosen kind of like in relationship to each other. This is Alana Clark's piece, and this is a really great video, and probably the most visceral piece of the show, because it has to do with her body and the top of her head, and you just kind of figure out that it is the top of her head, and it's, you know, and she's kind of feeling her way through. This is Your Chance sound piece, and so again, it's using directional sound, and it's quite, it almost kicks you out of the whole experience, and yeah, so it's quite fitting for the whole show. And just to end off with that image, this is Gallus Porus Kim's work. So a lot of these artists, some of them don't have any experience modeling, so sometimes I help them realize their vision. So I take the responsibility of like being an art installer, and which I also do, and I build the works for them and how they want to be it. So not necessarily, I don't see it as a collaboration, because art installers really don't get credit for building the works, but I see it as helping them kind of get their vision across. So this is the current show. This is Labyrinth, and this is the first time where I asked another artist to create the structure to hold the works, to place the works. So this is Amir Nickervan's Labyrinth, which he has modeled after his own painted sculptures. And I built all this kind of the trees and the environment and the lighting and all that stuff. So it was really kind of a nice step forward, because I really like this idea of having another artist build the pavilion for the works. And it really kind of gives my own ego up in this situation, and I really kind of like that. So in this show, we have Dorit Sapis, who is also a good friend of Harry Moss's there, and Daniel Dean, Jabade Kiel Huffman, Lito Catal, Amir Nickervan, Christian Ramirez, Paul Rosero Contreras. And yeah, so, and then this show, usually, all the other shows, I usually have this map that pops up, and this is the first show. I was like, well, it's a labyrinth, so you don't need a map, you know? And I also implemented this chat function, which I don't know if anybody really uses, so. Okay, so this is when you first enter a thing. And my background to my Zoom here is, if you face the other way, you get these, you see this other kind of foresty, God Ray, Dawn, well, sun's, yeah, Dawn. So this is Lito Catal's pieces. So these cut out aluminums, which are really great. So she's from Greece. And I kind of see these as the monsters, the minotaurs of the labyrinth. This is Dorit Sapis's Colosseum collars. And so she wears these as a performance work. And yeah, she talks about kind of like, she's a mediator. So she talks about like social justice and stuff like that. This is Jabade Kahil's Huffman's, I don't know how to pronounce it. So this is a video. So he uses, so this one, he's kind of bridging all these animations that he finds online and kind of creating this work. So this structure, I built after his old works, and we placed it into the environment. So the lighting has changed in this thing because why not? So this is Christian Ramirez's paintings. And they're quite amazing. So this is Danielle Dean's bed. So it's an Amazon Turk a worker. And so this was modeled. So this is another example where Danielle Dean did not have any 3D modeling experience. So she gave me the idea and she gave me pictures of what the bed looked like. And I had to recreate it all. And you can see on the top of the bed, it has this catacorn. So it's a catacorn, it's a cat unicorn, which I didn't even know existed before this. And so you can see the catacorn bed sheets, and there's also Powerade water and some, I think, Oreo thins and a cereal box at the bottom. And you can see that there's a video that plays of this worker doing kind of these clicks and stuff like that. So we also have bugs that are going to go on. So we have she wanted this idea of locus of swarms, kind of a swarm of locusts kind of surrounding the bed and kind of engulfing it so you can't see the bed anymore. So, and this kind of this crazy sound that goes on. So it's a really great piece. Okay, and then we go, once you exit the maze, you see Paul Rosero Contreras' work. And it's a really great hybrid between these two kind of biological systems. Inside there's this living coral, and the outside is this kind of obsidian crow situation going on. Okay, so that's the last of that show, and I'm just gonna go in quickly, and then we'll be on time, and talk about the next shows. So the next two shows I already have lined up. The next show is called Phantom Limb, and it has to do with the destroyed LACMA. So what I'm doing is actually remodeling, well, modeling the exact LACMA destroyed just like this, and I'm gonna be creating and placing it in that environment. So I already have a great list of artists for that. Can't say all their names yet, but it's gonna be a really great list of works, and mainly all artists based in LA. And here's the model of what I'm working on. It's not quite done yet, but it's getting there. So you can kind of see, and this is the most intensive modeling I've ever had to do because there's so many details to the LACMA, like outside and stuff like that. It's just really insane. So here's just part of it rendered. So you can see how accurate I've gotten all the details from the LACMA there. So that is the next show that opens on October 24th. And it should be pretty crazy. And the next show after that, which is happening in January, I'm collaborating with Alice Kunitz, and we're having her Los Angeles Museum of Art, and we're placing that pavilion into Epoch's environment. So that's it. Any questions?
Please feel free to use the chat. Peter, maybe I'll just kick off a question.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's really interesting the way you are using ideas from, can you hear me?
Yep.
Did I freeze? That you're using things such as Prometheus, the Labyrinth, other kinds of tropes from classical mythology, yeah, which is of course quite Western and hegemonic, but you are using these existing Western tropes for other purposes. And I was thinking maybe you could talk a little bit about just this notion of the labyrinth and why it was of interest to you as a trope.
Well, it was really kind of, really Amir's kind of suggestion that he really wanted to build this labyrinth, and I was just more researching it and found that article that I shared with all you guys. But it was really interesting, this idea of labyrinth, and the idea of from Fallen Monuments, which really kind of talked about the fragility of the institution, and then going into Labyrinth and kind of the way you navigate through this environment that you have, which is kind of, again, an allegory to an institution itself. So this way of getting lost and finding different areas and having dead ends and whatnot. So yeah, in a lot of my own work, I use Western tropes and Western mythology, but it's also seen from my perspective in a certain way. And I also use objects that are very, say, Asian or Orientalist, and seeing it from how I think that people see that object. So,
yes, and also you, in the article that we read, which was a really interesting article called "The Labyrinth is Exhibitionary Model," Noit Banal talks about the kind of history of artists using this form of the labyrinth, which of course has had many different meanings throughout history. So I guess that brings me also to another question, which is if you could talk a little bit about the difference in your role working as a curator with EPIC and what you are doing with your own practice. How do they inform one another as two different practices?
Yeah, so epoch, so there's two pronunciations for epoch and epic. So Americans say epic, Canadians and UK say epoch. So I'm Canadian, so I'm gonna say epoch. It doesn't really matter what you say. Yeah, so I really think that epoch is an extension of my work. So it's really bridging these practices it's an artistic practice. It's also a curatorial practice. It's also kind of commenting on gallery. And I'm really kind of trying to break the status quo of how a gallery functions. So I don't have overhead, I don't have shipping costs. And so I have the ability to not be tied to money and let money dictate how this gallery will go. So it's interesting that, you know, the art world loves categorization. And so they're always trying to categorize me as either just a gallery or just a curatorial project, but it's really all of that. It's really bridging all those kind of practices together. And it's so nice, much nicer seeing all your faces. So, yeah, so with this category, I applied to certain grants and I even applied to shows with this, and they're just like, what is this? It's not like art and stuff like that. The artists get it. The artists really get it. So everybody who have asked to be participating in the show, they know that it's part of my work, you know? It's the outside, more like the gallery system institutions. They don't really understand that it's not, that it's an extension or a part of a work that is actually a critical forum to kind of talk about these kind of issues. And I think this idea of building context and stuff is really important, which I don't think a lot of people are doing. So a lot of other some other artists do online shows, but they're very fantastical. And I don't think fantasy necessarily is needed right now in a certain way. Yes, there's a fantasy element that goes on these works because you're entering this whole new world, but it's also really tied to IRL, real life kind of situations, and bridging even real works that come into this world. But yeah, these are extensions. I mean, it's an accumulation of experiences that I've had, you know? So from teaching, from being an art installer, from working with technology, and you can see a progression from my own technological growth to getting to this point. And it's just an accumulation of all of these things. And then just my experiences, you know, and all these things that are just embedded, you know, you can't shut out like all these things are happening to you, you know, or they just come out, whether you like it or not. They're just going to come out in some form or another. So you're just going to have to deal with it and hopefully deal with it in a certain way, you know, that's really productive for you and other people that are around you. And you know, I really like this idea of like building a community and having a forum for people who really have their own shows postponed and whatnot to be able to have this new way of showing their work. And even after the quarantine's done, if it ever is done, I think I've proven that this model can exist, you know, and it can exist alongside physical galleries. I mean, it can work, you know. So, and I just want to hold up a mirror to all these other kind of ways of doing things and being critical of all their practices, because it's kind of messed up.
Yeah, one thing I think you're also doing is you're also disrupting the normative pathway that one always has to take when you go to all these blue chip galleries that are doing these virtual shows, I find it super boring. You
Yeah.
have to just,
Yeah, I mean, you see these, I mean, there was this one thing when Hausenwerth first put their online gallery on, and I've been kind of looking around and seeing like why. I mean, it's like there's got to be somebody that's going to be doing this as well as I am by now, and there, in my opinion, there hasn't been that level of poeticness and criticality that are going on with the shows. So when Hausenwerth did theirs, and they have a whole department now for this, the art and technology section. And I'm looking at them, they're using the same program as I am. And I'm like, and I know how much that program costs. It's not that much. So it's like interesting that all these things are coming around. So I realized that, you know, to me, like this epoch came out very organically through all my experiences and whatnot. But, and in a weird way, it's kind of easy for me to do it, but I realized that it wasn't easy for everybody to actually do it because they don't have the experiences that I had, you know what I mean? So that like with just picking up programs and being able to, and everything I'm learning is through YouTube essentially, but it's not like one YouTube thing is gonna tell you how to do this. It's like you're picking up little snippets from everything and you're putting it all together, you know? So yeah, it came about very organically and now it is what it is. And it's growing and it becoming, even from the first show, I mean, it's becoming more and more apparent that it's becoming, the mission is becoming very more critical and inclusive of BIPOC artists. And yeah, I think it has a mission and it has a purpose for me to kind of keep on going in a certain way. And it does inform my work. So, and it is part of my work. So, going back and forth and, you know, all this, and I have a piece that's coming up at LAX airport in 2021. And there's going to be elements of this that are going to be in that. So this is, you know, osmosis thing kind of happening with everything.
do we have any other questions from anyone? I don't see any in the chat, but does anyone just want to chime in? We have time for a couple of questions. Questions? No questions.
No questions.
No questions. Well, I guess everyone is saving them for the seminar.
There is one in the chat.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. Valencia, go ahead. I'm sorry. I must have just come up. Oh, and Sean now too. Okay. Valencia and Sean, go ahead. Valencia?
Yeah. So the question I just asked was, what message would you like future generations of museum directors, curators to take away from your Falling Monument and Afterlife work?
Wow. That's a heavy foresight into the future. This idea of inclusivity, of course, we can see that there's a lot of issues that are going in institutions themselves, and of course I'm commenting on that. And you know, a lot of the issues really have to come down with who is running them and the idea of the money that surrounds it all, you know? And that is the most corrupt thing. So I'm really trying to build this gallery and not having to rely on that. So even I don't even act as an art dealer really, because like any inquiries that I get for sales or about the artist, I just direct directly to the artist or the gallery themselves. And so I'm just kind of removing that because I know there's a part of me, if I start selling work, then I would try to find work that's more sellable, pick up a painter, you know, having to represent and chasing collectors. And I don't really necessarily find that interesting for myself. And I want to keep it more of an artistic kind of type of thing and, you know, and try to find a different way to monetize if I'm going to do that. So who knows? So fortunately, I have no overhead. I have no, you know, I pay for some programs and maybe some models once in a while, and that's about it. So it's just a lot of my time, which is I'm welcome to give. It keeps me going, you know. I mean, quarantine, you know, I find that, you know, I'm a Gen X, so, you know, we're a latchkey kids. So we were just, you know, let us on our own, we'll do it. And so I kind of, in a way, excelled during this time because my studio is in my house. So I'm just like, I have all my computers here and stuff like that. So I just like chop away, you know what I mean? It's like, well, whatever. So it's just natural for me.
So Sean, would you like to close with your question, please?
Hi,
Hey,
Sean.
Peter. How's it going?
So me and Sean were just on a panel just recently, but okay. Hi, Sean.
Hey, I just had a question about the connection between cinematic influence, obviously,
Yeah.
Blade Runner, horror films, that kind
Yeah.
of thing, that
Yeah.
which we're all familiar with, and sort of your connection to VR and like augmented reality experiences and how they kind of like interconnect with one another in your mind.
Yeah. So in the beginning of my work, I really use cinematic sources, and I really draw it on that. And I really kind of look at the gallery as a complete whole, as then when you go through the gallery, I'm always thinking about how people are going through it and what are they experiencing first, because I do have control over that in a certain way, where the places you click, and it kind of leads you very cinematically as that. And I am consciously thinking of how, even though it's non-narrative and it's not linear, but it is kind of linear in a certain way. So I kind of try to lead the viewer through certain things and place things in a certain way so that they can experience it that way. I don't know if that answered your question, but
I guess it was more about
that definitely influenced, this idea of cinema and the idea of science fiction kind of really has really informed a lot of what I do, and especially with Epoch 2 and this other type of worldness that happens with it. And yeah, and this idea of like, I always think of it as like when at the beginning of any movie, you start off with a scene. It's like an overview of a city or something like that. So I always think of it as starting off with like that. How does the scene look? How is it going to start off? What's the mood? And what's this thing is trying to establish right away?
Yeah, I think it was more in relation to like a lot of people use the idea of fantasy to communicate sort of an underlying message regarding civilization or society or culture.
Yeah, science fiction is that. Science fiction is taking something that's possibly in the future and kind of interjecting it here. So I always try to make my works, even though they are science fictional based, I try to make the future present in a weird way. So that's kind of one of my goals. And I think, especially with Epoch in a certain way, even though it's not so much science fiction, but and not even fantasy, I'm really trying to more bridge it into some kind of a hybrid between the real world and this alternate world. So I still don't know if I answered your question. But yes.
So I think on that note, we're going to have to say goodbye. Peter, thank you so much for your talk and for presenting your work. We really enjoyed it. And if you are in the VAS seminar, please stay on. If you're from the general public, thank you for joining. And you can also write any other chat questions if you would like, and we'll pass them to Peter. Thanks so much, everybody.